In a scene both shocking and laced with irony, a racist cop brutally punched a Mexican teen right in front of her father, completely unaware that his abusive behavior had unexpectedly earned him the title of the new chief in town, a twist poised to upend the local power structure. The water was cold, much colder than Eleanor had expected when she plunged into Lake Everett that morning, but the numbing chill was a relief compared to the fire in her lungs. 15 feet below the surface, Eleanor pushed deeper, her arms pulling against the resistance. Sunlight filtered through in wavering beams, illuminating particles suspended in the otherwise crystal-clear water. She'd always loved how peaceful it was down here, how the world above, with all its noise and complications, seemed to vanish. But today was different. Today she wasn't swimming for pleasure or escape. Today she was racing against time. Her muscles burned as she propelled herself forward, scanning the murky bottom for any sign of movement. The visibility was good, but not perfect. Algae-covered rocks created shadows and hiding places where small things could easily disappear, or small people. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs when she spotted a flash of red, the same red as the t-shirt 6-year-old Lily had been wearing when she wandered away from her mother at the lakeside picnic. The same red that Elena had glimpsed disappearing beneath the water's surface just minutes ago. She pushed harder, ignoring the pressure building in her chest. She hadn't taken a full breath before diving in, too desperate to reach the child before it was too late. Now her body was screaming for oxygen, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. 3 more powerful strokes brought her close enough to see Lily's small form, unnaturally still, pinned beneath a fallen tree branch. The girl's eyes were closed, her dark hair floating around her face like a halo. No, no, no. Eleanor's inner voice was frantic as she reached for the branch. It was heavier than it looked, waterlogged and covered in slime. She pulled with all her strength, but it barely moved. Her lungs were on fire now, the need to breathe becoming impossible to ignore. Yet something stronger kept her from swimming back to the surface, the memory of her own sister, of another lake, of being too late. Not again. Not this time. With a surge of desperate energy, Eleanor braced her feet against the lake bottom and heaved. The branch shifted, just enough for her to reach Lily and pull her free. The girl was limp in her arms, a dead weight that threatened to drag them both down. But Elena had come this far. She wouldn't give up now. Using her last reserves of strength, she kicked toward the surface, clutching Lily tightly against her chest. The sunlight grew brighter, the water warmer. Just a few more seconds and they would make it. The moment they broke the surface, Elena gasped, dragging precious air into her burning lungs. Around her, she could hear panicked voices, splashing as people rushed into the water to help. Someone took Lily from her arms, while strong hands guided Elena toward the shore. As her feet found solid ground, she stumbled, collapsing onto the pebbled beach. Through blurred vision, she watched as a park ranger began CPR on Lily's small body, counting compressions in a steady voice that somehow cut through the chaos. "Come on," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "Please." The next 60 seconds stretched into an eternity as she watched, helpless and exhausted. Then, suddenly, Lily coughed, water spilling from her mouth as she drew a shuddering breath. Elena closed her eyes, tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. She'd done it. She hadn't been too late. But her momentary peace was shattered by a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years, a voice she'd hoped never to hear again. "Elena? Is that really you?" She looked up and the world seemed to tilt beneath her. Standing a few feet away, his face as devastatingly familiar as it had been in her nightmares, was Diego. The man she'd once loved. The man who'd been driving the night her sister drowned. 6 months earlier, Elena Reyes had been pouring coffee at Lighthouse Cafe when she first heard about the position at Lake Everett State Park. It was a slow Tuesday morning, just her and a handful of regulars, when Manuel Wilson, the park's maintenance supervisor, mentioned they needed a new ranger for the upcoming season. "Someone with water rescue training would be ideal," he'd said, wrapping his weathered hands around a steaming mug. "We've had too many close calls these past few summers." Eleanor had turned away, busying herself with wiping down the counter. Water rescue. The very words made her throat tighten, memories threatening to surface like debris after a storm. "You should apply," said Rosa, the cafe's owner, giving Elena a meaningful look. "You were a competitive swimmer, weren't you? And didn't you mention some lifeguard certification?" Elena shrugged, avoiding Rosa's gaze. That was a long time ago. But the idea had taken root, impossible to ignore. Later that night, in her small apartment above the cafe, Elena pulled out the box she kept hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were the remnants of a life she'd abandoned: swimming medals, lifeguard certifications, a faded photograph of two smiling teenage girls with identical dark hair, standing at the edge of a lake. Eleanor touched the photo gently, tracing her sister's face with a fingertip. "I'm sorry, Maria," she whispered. 3 weeks later, she was hired as Lake Everett's newest park ranger. The job brought a strange mixture of peace and torment. Being near the water again was like confronting a fear she'd spent years running from. Some days she could almost forget why she'd given up swimming, why she'd left her hometown and everyone she knew. Other days the memories were so vivid she could barely breathe. Her supervisor, Frank Mendez, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, seemed to sense there was more to her story than she'd shared in her interview. "Everyone who works near water has a reason," he told her one evening as they closed up the ranger station. "Some are running towards something, some away. As long as you can do the job when it matters, I don't need to know which one you are." Eleanor had nodded, grateful for his understanding and lack of questions. By early summer, she'd settled into a routine: mornings patrolling the hiking trails, afternoons at the beach or in the boat, evenings helping campers or leading educational programs. The work was satisfying, and for the first time in years she felt something like purpose. Then came the Memorial Day weekend, the unofficial start of summer, bringing crowds of visitors to the lake. Elena was scheduled for beach duty, watching over families enjoying the first truly warm day of the year. She noticed the Santiago family immediately, not because she recognized Diego, hidden behind sunglasses and a baseball cap, but because of their daughter. A tiny thing with dark hair and a bright red shirt, building an elaborate sandcastle at the water's edge, while her mother sat nearby, absorbed in a book. The little girl reminded Elena of Maria at that age, fearless and creative. Elena found herself watching them throughout the morning, an uneasy feeling growing in her chest. It wasn't until the lunch rush, when the beach was at its most crowded, that Elena spotted Diego. He was returning from the concession stand carrying drinks and snacks. Without the cap and glasses, there was no mistaking him. The same strong jaw, the same confident walk. 5 years older, with new lines around his eyes, but unmistakably the man who had once been the center of her world. Elena's first instinct was to hide, to call another ranger to cover her shift. But before she could move, Diego's wife had noticed something was wrong. "Lily?" she called, setting down her book and looking around. "Diego, do you see Lily?" The panic in her voice cut through the beach noise, and Elena felt her ranger training kick in, overriding her personal distress. She scanned the shoreline, the water, the paths leading to the restrooms, and then she saw it, a flash of red disappearing beneath the gentle waves. Without hesitation, Elena was running, blowing her whistle to clear swimmers from her path. She didn't have time to think about Diego, about the past, about anything except reaching that child before it was too late. As emergency services arrived to take Lily to the hospital for evaluation, Elena found herself sitting on a bench near the ranger station, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm day. Her body wouldn't stop shaking. Here, a foam cup of hot coffee appeared in front of her, held by a hand she would have recognized anywhere. Elena took it without looking up. "Thank you," she murmured, more out of habit than genuine gratitude. She didn't want anything from Diego Santiago, not even coffee. He hesitated, then sat beside her, leaving careful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. "The paramedics say she'll be fine," Diego finally said, his voice rougher than she remembered. "Thanks to you." Eleanor nodded, still not trusting herself to look at him. Just doing my job. Elena. He said her name like a plea. I never thought I'd see you again. After the trial, after everything, when you disappeared. I didn't disappear, she interrupted, anger flaring suddenly. I left. There's a difference. You didn't say goodbye. Now she did look at him, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. His eyes were the same deep brown she remembered, now shadowed with something that might have been guilt or grief, or both. Why would I? She asked quietly. You killed my sister, Diego? He flinched as if she'd struck him. It was an accident. I know it was an accident. Elena cut in. That's why I testified for you. That's why you're here with your wife and daughter instead of in prison. But accident or not, Maria is still dead. The words hung between them, sharp and final. Elena stood, letting the blanket fall away. I'm glad Lily is okay. Please tell your wife I'm sorry for the scare. She walked away, her legs steadier than she'd expected. Behind her, she heard Diego call her name once, but she didn't turn back. That night, alone in her cabin, Elena pulled out her phone and did what she'd refused to do for 5 years. She looked up Diego Santiago online. There wasn't much. A LinkedIn profile showing he now worked as an environmental engineer. A few tagged photos on his wife's more public Instagram, birthday parties, hiking trips, happy moments with Lily. One photo caught her attention. Diego and Lily at a swimming pool, the little girl wearing arm floaties and a determined expression. The caption read, "First swimming lesson. Daddy's little fish is conquering her fear. Chaque proud papa, chaque never give up." Something twisted in Elena's chest. Lily was afraid of water. After today, that fear would only be worse. And yet Diego was teaching her to swim, encouraging her to face it. Elena thought of Maria, of the night everything changed. They'd been at Lake Meridian for a bonfire party celebrating high school graduation. Diego had been drinking, they all had, but he'd insisted he was fine to drive home. Elena, trusting and equally impaired, hadn't argued. The road along the lake was winding, dark. Diego had taken a curve too fast. The car had broken through the guardrail, plunging into the water. Elena remembered fragments, the shocking cold, the frantic struggle to unbuckle her seatbelt, Diego pulling her through the window. Then realizing Maria was still inside, diving back again and again until someone had physically restrained her, convinced no one could still be alive in the submerged vehicle. But Eleanor had known better. If she'd just been faster, stronger, braver. Her phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Heard what happened today. You did good, Reyes. Take tomorrow off." She started to text back a refusal. She didn't want time alone with her thoughts, but another message came through before she could reply. "Also, the Santiago family asked for your contact info. Told them to talk to you directly. Hope that's okay." Elena froze, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. The thought of seeing Diego again, of talking to his wife, explaining their connection. It was too much. "Thanks," she finally replied. "I'll be in at regular time tomorrow." She set her phone aside and walked to the window, looking out at Lake Everett, silver under the rising moon. Somewhere across that water, in one of the lakeside vacation rentals, Diego and his family were together, grateful and shaken. Elena wondered if he'd told his wife about her yet, about their history. Did she know about Maria, about the accident, about the months Diego had spent in legal limbo, facing potential manslaughter charges before being cleared of criminal negligence? Did she know that Elena had been the key witness who'd saved him from prison, only to walk away from him immediately after? Elena closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Tomorrow she would do her job. She would be professional. And if the Santiago family sought her out, she would be polite but distant. What she wouldn't do was let Diego Santiago back into her life. She'd only just begun to rebuild it. But 3 weeks, Elena managed to avoid any direct encounter with the Santiagos. She switched her shifts to minimize beach duty, volunteered for the more remote hiking trails, and kept busy with paperwork whenever possible. Frank noticed, of course he did, but didn't comment beyond a raised eyebrow when she offered to catalogue equipment in the storage shed during a particularly beautiful Saturday afternoon. "You're going to have to face whatever you're running from eventually," he said mildly, handing her the inventory list. "But in the meantime, make sure you count those life jackets twice. Last summer, we were missing 3. Eleanor had smiled tightly and disappeared into the shed, grateful for the dusty solitude. But Lake Everett was only so big, and the universe had its own plans. On a stormy Tuesday morning, when the beach was deserted and the lake whipped into whitecaps, Eleanor found herself face to face with Carmen Santiago. They nearly collided outside the visitor center, both seeking shelter from a sudden downpour. Elena recognized her immediately, petite, elegant, with intelligent eyes and Lily's dark hair. "Oh," Carmen said, brushing rain from her jacket. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking where—" She stopped, recognition dawning. "You're Ranger Reyes, the one who saved Lily." Elena nodded, uncomfortably aware that she was trapped in this conversation. "How is she doing?" "Much better, thank you." Carmen's smile was genuine, warm. "She's been having some nightmares, but the therapist says that's normal. She actually asked if she could thank you in person." "That's not necessary," Elena said quickly. "I think it might help her." Carmen's gaze was direct, assessing. "And perhaps you as well." Something in her tone made Eleanor wonder just how much Diego had told his wife. Did Carmen know that Eleanor woke gasping from her own water nightmares? That she still heard Maria calling her name in the dark? "Diego wants to talk to you too," Carmen continued, confirming Elena's suspicion. "He told me everything about the accident, about your sister. I'm so sorry for your loss." The simple words, spoken with such sincere compassion, caught Elena off guard. Her carefully constructed defenses wavered. "Thank you," she managed. "But it was a long time ago." Carmen tilted her head slightly. "Was it? Some losses never really feel distant, do they?" Before Elena could respond, the visitor center door opened and Diego stepped out, Lily tucked safely against his side under a shared umbrella. He stopped when he saw them together, a complex emotion crossing his face. "Elena," he said softly. Lily looked up with wide, solemn eyes. "Are you the lady who got me out of the water?" The direct question from this small, serious child broke through Elena's resolve. She knelt down to Lily's level. "Yes, I am. My name is Elena." "Thank you for saving me," Lily said with the simple, devastating honesty of a 6-year-old. "I was really scared." "I was scared too," Elena admitted, surprising herself with the truth. "But you were very brave." Lily considered this, then asked, "Are you still scared of the water? Daddy says it's okay to be scared, but we shouldn't let being scared stop us from doing important things." Elena's eyes flickered up to Diego, who looked both proud and pained. "Your daddy is right," she said carefully. "And yes, sometimes I'm still scared, but I keep trying to be brave too." The girl nodded, satisfied with this answer. Carmen gently suggested that Lily check the gift shop for the stuffed otter she'd been wanting, effectively giving the adults a moment alone. As Carmen guided Lily inside, Diego stepped closer to Elena, sheltered from the rain by the building's overhang. "We're staying through the end of the month," he said without preamble. "Carmen's parents were supposed to join us, but her father's health isn't good. We decided to stay anyway, give Lily a chance to not end her summer with a trauma." Elena crossed her arms, unsure what he expected her to say to this. "I know you don't want to see me," Diego continued. "I don't blame you, but Lily has been asking about you and Carmen thinks we both think it might help her to spend some time with you. Maybe see you in your element, confident in the water." "You want me to give your daughter swimming lessons?" Elena asked incredulously. Diego shook his head. "No, nothing formal, just maybe let her see that the water isn't always dangerous, that what happened was an exception, not the rule." He paused. "It could be good for you too." The presumption in those last words sparked Elena's anger. "You don't know what would be good for me, Diego. You lost that right a long time ago." He accepted this with a nod. "Fair enough. But will you at least think about it? For Lily's sake." "Elena," wanted to refuse outright, to walk away. But the image of Lily's serious little face stayed with her. A child shouldn't have to carry fear like that, a fear Elena understood all too well. "I'll think about it," she finally said. That night, unable to sleep, Elena found herself at the lake's edge, watching moonlight ripple across the water. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to really think about Maria. Not just the night she died, but all the days she lived. Maria, who had taught Elena to swim when they were children. Maria, who had faced every challenge with a fearless grin. Maria, who had loved Diego like a brother long before he and Elena started dating. What would Maria think of her now, hiding from life, from love, from the very water that had once been her element? "You're being ridiculous, Elena," she could almost hear her sister say. "The water didn't kill me. Bad luck and bad decisions did." By dawn, Elena had made her decision. When Lily saw Elena waiting at the small, secluded beach, her steps faltered. She gripped her father's hand tighter, eyes widening with apprehension. "It's okay, sweetheart," Diego murmured. "Remember what we talked about? We're just going to sit by the water today. No pressure." Elena had chosen this spot carefully, a quiet cove away from the main beach, with shallow, clear water and a gentle slope. She'd arrived early, setting up a colorful blanket with a picnic basket and some beach toys. "Hi, Lily," she said with a smile that felt only slightly forced. "I thought we could have a little picnic and maybe look for some interesting stones. This beach has some really pretty ones." Lily didn't respond immediately, but she did allow her parents to lead her to the blanket. Carmen gave Elena a grateful look as they settled down. For the first hour, they stayed, well away from the water, sharing sandwiches and fruit, talking about safe topics. Lily's school, Carmen's work as a children's book illustrator, the family of otters that lived nearby. Gradually, Elena guided the conversation toward the lake, pointing out birds diving for fish, explaining how the different depths created varying shades of blue. To her surprise, Lily began asking questions, her natural curiosity overcoming her fear. When the girl tentatively suggested they look for stones closer to the water's edge, Elena felt a small victory. They moved the blanket forward, just enough that the lake lapped a few feet away. Diego and Carmen exchanged a look of cautious hope. By the third meeting, Lily was willing to wade ankle-deep, clutching Elena's hand with fierce determination. By the fifth, she was splashing in the shallows, laughing when droplets caught the sunlight. And Elena was healing too, though she'd never have admitted it aloud. Being in the water with Lily, seeing it through a child's eyes, was reawakening something she'd thought dead. It was during their sixth session, as Carmen took photos of Lily building a mermaid castle at the water's edge, that Diego finally broached the subject Elena had been avoiding. "I never properly apologized to you," he said quietly, sitting beside her on the blanket. "After the accident, everything happened so fast. The investigation, the trial, your testimony, and then you were gone." Elena watched Lily, now instructing her mother on the exact placement of a shell. "I couldn't stay," she said simply. "No, but I need you to hear this." Diego turned to face her fully. "I am so sorry, Elena, not just for the accident, but for everything that followed, for not being there for you when you lost Maria, for letting you carry that burden alone while I was focused on my own legal problems." The sincerity in his voice made it impossible to dismiss his words. Elena felt tears threatening and blinked, them back. "We all failed that night," she said eventually. "I shouldn't have let you drive. I should have been faster getting Maria out." "No," Diego's voice was firm. "That wasn't on you. I was the driver. I was responsible. But You testified that I wasn't recklessly drunk, that the road was dark and the guardrail was faulty. You probably saved me from prison." His eyes searched hers. "Why did you do that if you blamed me so much?" Elena had asked herself the same question countless times over the years. "Because it was the truth," she said finally. "And because Maria loved you too. She wouldn't have wanted your life destroyed along with hers." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past between them, not lighter exactly, but somehow more bearable for being acknowledged. Lily wants to try floating next time, Diego said eventually. With those pool noodles Frank lent us. Elena nodded, watching as the little girl carefully decorated her sandcastle with pebbles. She's braver than she knows. Diego's smile was sad but genuine, like her Aunt Maria. The unexpected words sent a shock through Elena. She looked at him sharply. We named her Lillian Maria, he explained softly. Carmen knew how important your sister was to me, to us. For the first time since the accident, Elena allowed herself to cry in Diego's presence. Not the desperate, angry tears of that night, but quieter tears of recognition, of the bittersweet realization that while some things were irretrievably lost, others could perhaps be found again. On the last day of August, Elena stood at the end of the dock watching the Santiago family load their car for the trip home. Lily was chattering excitedly about starting first grade, already planning when they would return to Lake Everett. Thanksgiving break, she called to Eleanor, waving frantically. Mommy says we can come back and you can show me where the otters make their winter home. Elena waved back, surprised by the hollow feeling in her chest. She'd grown attached to this small, determined child, who now splashed happily in the shallows, and had even learned to float on her back, gazing up at the clouds with newfound wonder. Carmen approached, holding a flat package wrapped in simple, brown paper. We wanted to give you this, she said, pressing it into Eleanor's hands. It's a thank you, but also, well, you'll see. Hesitantly, Eleanor unwrapped it. Inside was a children's book, beautifully illustrated in Carmen's distinctive style. The title read, Beneath Silent Waters, and showed a young girl and a woman swimming together in a sunlit lake, surrounded by friendly fish and water plants. Elena opened to the dedication page and caught her breath. For Eleanor, who taught us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the determination to move through it, and in memory of Maria, who swims with us always. Carmen illustrated it, but the story was Diego's idea, came Diego's voice from behind her. He's been working on it all month. Elena turned, the book clutched against her chest. It's beautiful, she managed. We'd like to publish it, Carmen said. If that's okay with you, a portion of the proceeds would go to water safety education. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Lily came running up still, damp from her final swim. Did you give her the book? Do you like it, Eleanor? I helped with the story. Eleanor knelt down and hugged the child, inhaling the scent of sunshine and lake water in her hair. I love it. Thank you. As the Santiago family made their final goodbyes, promises of return visits and phone calls exchanged, Eleanor felt something shift inside her. The lake glittered behind them, no longer a symbol of loss and fear, but of possibility and healing. Frank found her later, still standing at the dock long after the Santiagos had driven away. They seem like good people, he commented, joining her in gazing out at the water. They are, Elena agreed. You planning to stick around for the fall season? He asked casually. Could use an experienced ranger for the school groups. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the late summer air fill her lungs. For the first time in 5 years, she felt fully present in her body, in her life. Yes, she said, I think I will. Frank nodded, satisfied. Good. Water's different in autumn. Clearer. Lets you see all the way to the bottom sometimes. As he walked away, Eleanor smiled at the metaphor. The water was different now, or perhaps she was. So either way, she was no longer drowning in memories, but swimming through them, finding her way back to shore. She opened the children's book again, tracing the illustration of 2 figures swimming beneath the surface, one clearly Lily, the other a woman with dark hair who could have been Elena, or perhaps Maria. Beneath silent waters they all continued, carrying the past with them, yet moving steadily forward, stroke by stroke, toward whatever waited on the distant shore. Character: Count, 14,997,